Hello everyone, greetings of the day. I am Dr. Lata Rani. I am working as an associate professor and program anchor of Banking, Financial Service and Insurance Department at Delhi Skill and Entrepreneurship University, New Delhi. Today I am going to talk about one of the important topic, free consent. The word free is very important. We all are attracted towards this free. Somewhere in the mall, if I see that you get this at this price and you will get this as free, that catches the attention. So everybody, all of us are inclined towards this word, free. Though we know nothing is free, not even the oxygen that we are inhaling. So free consent is one of the essential element as per Section 10 of Indian Contract Act. Now when we talk of this free consent, we need to understand these two words independently, and then we come as collaborative, cohesive of these two words. The word free is which is available for the usage, for the consumption, and there is no cost involved. Consent is something where we are assented to. So there is offerer and offeree. So if both are agreeing on to something, assenting towards each other, then that word makes consent. So consent is derived from consultation. Have you consulted him? Have you consulted her? Have he agreed upon? Have she denied upon? So consent is taken from the consultation. So consent is something that we derive, we exert, we are availing it. We are going to understand all these under the session, under the topic called free consent. Now when we say free consent, that is defined as Indian Contract Act 1872. Free consent is basically consensus ad idem, where the mind of two people who are entering into a contract are making the same interpretation. So we are going to understand when consent is not free, under the consideration of coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, and mistake of fact. So all have the specific sections ranging from section 13 to section 22. Coercion falls under the section 15. Undue influence falls under the section 16. Fraud under the section 17, and misrepresentation under the section 18. Mistake have three sections, section 20, 21 and 22. We would talk about free consent, but before this, many of us take consent and free consent as same, though it is not. I'll be starting my session with the word called consent. I'll be trying to explain the difference between consent and free consent. So as such, when we talk of consent, it occurs when one person voluntarily agrees to the proposal. Word voluntarily is very important, or desires of another. So it is something that I am agreeing to the proposal or the offer. So when we talk of just inviting a person to a party and he agrees, it is consent. So consent is voluntarily you are agreeing on those things. So if somebody is inviting you to a party and you candidly say yes, it is consent. So consent is when you are agreeing on to the another. So if some charity show is going on, they have invited you to give a counseling session to the students, you agree to that proposal, it is consent. So consent is the agreement of to the proposal, of to the offer, or you are agreeing on to be part of that desire of another. But in the Indian Contract Act, the definition of consent is given as it is when two or more persons agree upon the same thing and in the same sense. So that means that is where consent is lying. So I am not talking about free consent as of now. I am speaking and I am explaining the word consent. So when both parties agree upon same thing in the same manner, in the same sense, in the same interpretation, that is where consent is okay. That means if there are two friends, one of the friend have one flat and one villa. So that friend wants to sell one of the flat. He talks to his friend and friend says, yes, I am very much interested. So friend A wanted to sell a flat, but friend B understood it as a villa, that it means consent is missing. Because friend A wanted to sell just a flat and friend B understood that he is selling his villa. So selling a flat versus purchasing a villa is not matching with each other. So same thing is not there, same sense is not there, same interpretation is not there. When all these same are not matching, then there is no consent. When consent is not there, it is again void from the beginning. I would like to mention the case of Raffles versus Vishal's. Two parties, that is A and B, entered into a contract for the sale of 125 cotton bales by a ship named Peerless from Bombay. So there were two ships with the same name. Party A was thinking of one ship and party B was thinking of another ship. So thinking mismatched. When thinking mismatched, so there was no meeting of minds. So the contract is invalid because they are not thinking in terms of same thing, in terms of same sense, or deriving the same interpretation. So that contract is lacking consent. So we use the word there is no consent available. From this case, from this scenario, we will not say there is no free consent. We will just use the word consent is not there. Consent is lagged, consent is not visible, or there is no meeting of minds. So when minds are not meeting in a same manner, then consent is lacking, contract is invalid. Nobody can sue, challenge each other in the court. So consent means agree to do something or to the desire of another, to give permission. So consent is just when a parent is signing on a permission slip to allow his or her child to go on a trip, to go on a field trip, to go on a picnic trip. That is consent. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Consent and free consent are taken as one, whereas they are not one. The meaning of consent and free consent seems to be similar, but there is a difference. So difference is of elements. So elements of consent are limited to a similar purpose to make meeting the minds. So we are thinking in a same manner, with the same sense, with the same interpretation. Whereas consent of free consent is something where we are going to say that the consent is not prejudiced, not biased, not obtained by these 5 scenarios. Number 1, coercion. Number 2, undue influence. Number 3, fraud. Number 4, misrepresentation of facts. And number 5, mistake. So when we are considering these 5 scenarios, consent becomes free. That means that is not induced, that is not obtained from these mechanisms. Void, yes. When there is no contract, in terms of no consent, it is voidable, it is void. Whereas aggrieved party under the case of free consent has a choice. They may make contract valid or they may make contract void. So it is voidable at the option of aggrieved party. So when I say consent and free consent, consent is something which is making the minds, neating the minds, thinking in the same manner. Free consent is when consent is not obtained from the mechanism of coercion, undue influence, misrepresentation, mistake and fraud. So what is free consent? Let us define free consent as the contract based on section 3 of the Indian Contract Act 1872. Meaning of free consent is an agreement between 2 parties for the same purpose with a union of thoughts. That means the principle of consensus ad idem applies. That means the concept of meeting the minds, thinking in the same manner, performing in the same manner, understanding the terms and conditions in the same manner will be making it as free consent if it is not induced by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation and mistake of facts. Let us understand one example, that there are 2 parties A and B. A had some financial crisis, pandemic hit, financial crisis, number of sectors have shown disturbed performance. Few were the sectors which were stuck, like hotel sector, hospitality sector, they were stuck for some time. So A had some financial crisis. So he wants to make a contract. Here B is aware of his position. B knows that A is suffering from the financial crisis, but B wants to accept the contract. Then in that case, contract is made with a mutual consent to have certain funds exchange. There is a free consent available. So B knew that the position of A is not strong, it is not financially strong. I am supplying the funds, I am agreeing to supply the funds. So this is mutual consent obtained. So there is no fraud, no cheating. A has not given any false promises, right? So when the consent is mutual, in that case, this is the contract, this is the example taken from the free consent. So that is nothing but free consent of the contract. So free consent and consent have to be understood. Consent is just meeting of minds. When we are thinking and performing in the same manner as the front person wants us to explain. So that is where free consent is leviable. So consent is equal to meeting of minds. Free consent is equal to meeting of minds plus no case of, no obtainment of coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation or mistake. So when any of these things are taken up in the contract, then the consent is not free. Consent is not said to be free, contract is not valid. It is invalid, or in a very specific legal language, it is voidable. So consent is said to be free if it is not induced by coercion, undue influence, misrepresentation, mistake and fraud. Very, very important. First is coercion. What is coercion? Yes, it is, look at the picture where somebody is threatening a person. So if this is the scenario where you are using some unlawful means, some illegal weapons to enter into a contract, then that is where consent is not free. So coercion is when a person unlawfully threatens or forces a person via some forbidden acts that leads to coercion. Forbidden acts is any prohibited acts by IPC, Indian Penal Code. So it means one of the party is actually forcing another person to enter into a contract. So coercion is basically threatening. So you are using your physical force to get the contract signed, to make the party performing for that contract. Let's say there is one Mr. A. He has kidnapped one child. Mr. A is calling the child parents. See, you have to do my 2 jobs so that I could send your child back to your home. So number 1 is send an amount of 5 crore. Second, I would some sort of supply would be given to you and you have to supply it to the another person. So 2 work. Let's take an example. And the parents of the child agree. That means giving the amount as well as supplying of the material. So in that case, there is a physical force, there is a mental pressure is given, so commitment is taken. As a result, if commitment is taken forcefully, then that is the case of coercion. So you are using a physical force to get the contract signed, to make the person fulfilling the norms, fulfilling the contract. In that case, that effect of this coercion leads to cancellation of the entire contract. but there is a investigation authority who will investigate the case. But let me tell you, coercion is where persons speak up against the incident. So once parents of the child perform the contract, give the amount and supply the material, and once they receive their child, they approach to the police. Okay, this thing has happened. So then the matter of investigation starts and the action is taken against the person who has used physical force. So you could see this picture where person is at gunpoint to perform the contract, to perform for the contract. So we can easily assess that the contract is not valid. The mechanism to obtain the consent is not free. So free consent is when there is no coercion. So if any of such contract is created with the help of physical force, then the contract is falling under the purview of coercion. So coercion means forcing an individual to enter into a contract. So you are using a physical force to obtain the consent of the party. Coercion may involve the actual infliction of physical and psychological harm in order to enhance the credibility of a threat. So threat of further harming can lead to person's cooperation, obedience, consent, performing for you. So you have used a physical force to make contract and to perform a person with a contract. Let's say a person Z calls up Mr. B and says he is aware that I am going to kill you if you are not going to let my cousin house out on a rent. So even if he pays the consideration, but the force that is being used is physical force, is coercion, is part of coercion. So no matter if Z, A, B all are attaining the age of majority, no matter if they are paying the consideration, paying the rent, but what matters is Z has called up, if you will not give, if you will not let out your flat to Mr. B, I will kill you. So using the physical force that Z is giving a house on let out to B will make it as coercion. Let's take another example. A went out for a walk. B approaches A with a stranger. He pulls out his gun and asks A to give all his possessions. Here the consent of A is obtained by coercion. So coercion is very clear. That is, a person is using physical force to threaten another person to obtain the consent for the contract. So as such, coercion is clear, examples are clear. Let us understand how coercion is going to impact the contract. When we talk of coercion, the effect of coercion is voidable contract. Contract is void at the option of aggrieved party. If aggrieved party speaks up against it, then it is void. If party does not speak up, it is valid. So it is voidable. voidable at the option of aggrieved party. Talking about coercion, it is also known as duress in English law. So duress is when the consensus or assent or agreement is made between two parties under the force, physical force. So physical force is very, very important, that should be investigated, proofs are aligned and action is taken up. So like I said, there is Mr. A who has called up parents of kidnapped child. So there must be a proof of the call, number 1, recording of that conversation, number 2, and then obviously approaching to the police and lodging in FIR. So then investigation starts. So coercion is using the physical force and giving the pressure to accept the contract, to accept the terms and conditions of the contract. It is voidable and it cannot be converted into valid, even if there is a consideration, there is attainment of age of majority, but the object that is not legal. So that makes illegal contract. So as far as free consent is concerned and consent is concerned, we have taken up the case of coercion that falls under section 15 of Indian Contract Act 1872. Coercion is the first that we have discussed under the category of free consent. So we have understood consent where parties are agreeing voluntarily, and we have understood free consent, that means free consent which is not obtained by using any of these methods, that is coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation and mistakes. So with this, I am ending up here, and I believe the concept of consent, free consent and coercion is clear to you. Thank you. Thank you so much.